And he contacted Amir, and Amir told him, we're not working on this. Go do whatever you want. So Brian forked the code. This is open source, so fork just means copy it and rename it. Renamed it to OpenBazaar. There's also a change in focus, because Amir was very explicitly focused on darknet market, illicit trade. But Brian felt that actually decentralized trade isn't only beneficial for people working in darknet markets. If you take the middleman out of trade, that can be beneficial to everyone. So OpenBazaar is not specifically built just as a darknet market. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So we started to get contributors from around the world. People really bought into the idea of decentralized trade, which was exciting. And we worked for about a year on this as a passion project, a hobby, a side thing in our own jobs. Brian Hoffman is a developer who works on encrypted health databases. I was a technology policy analyst for a think tank in Washington, D.C. Another one of the main people involved, Dr. Washington Sanchez, is a PhD cancer researcher in Australia. So this was a side thing. But it began to take so much of our time, and we got so much interest in the project, that we actually decided to pursue venture capital funding and make a company in order to get enough resources to hire full-time developers and really make this thing work well and be able to take on a significant portion of trade. Because the code quality for this side project wasn't great, to be honest. The first take wasn't great. So we did that. We got some funding from Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures, prominent venture capitalist firms in America. And we hired some really great people on board. We have a phenomenal team. And completely rewrote the code base. So there's really no remnants of dark market anymore. The idea was what started all this, but the code is no longer the same. And then we actually released the version 1 in April of 2016. So I see people with your laptops open. Go to openbazaar.org, download OpenBazaar, try it out yourselves. I strongly recommend you do so. It is free, open source. Okay, now what we're doing is working on the 2.0 improvements, and I'll talk about that more extensively later. Just some quick stats. First, it's really hard to get statistics on a fully peer-to-peer platform, right? The trade it's all encrypted. It's going directly between buyer and seller, and so, and sometimes an optional third party called a moderator that helps for dispute resolution. I'll talk about that in a minute. So there's no central call to any database to get numbers from. Now, there are some ways you can get statistics. You can crawl the network for things that are publicly listed, for the number of stores and listings. Justin may talk about that in his talk, because the service that he's providing, Duo Search, is a search engine for OpenBazaar. They do that. Buyers is much harder to know because there's a lot of churn, right? Completely peer-to-peer network. People come on and go off all the time, so we don't really have good stats on that. Right now, there's roughly about just over 250 stores consistently online selling products and over 7,000 listings. That's sort of where it's been at for a little while now. The number of people who have downloaded the installer is over 265,000. So how come we have that many people who've downloaded the installer but only 250 stores online? I have some theories as to why that is. First of all, it doesn't mean because they've downloaded the installer that they actually went through and installed it. It doesn't mean that it installed correctly and that they're able to run it. And I think most of the time what happens is people try it out and don't continue using it long term for reasons I'll talk about that I think we're addressing in the 2.0. A side note, we have a really great Slack community. There's over 3,000 people on board there who just like to talk about Bitcoin and OpenBazaar decentralization. So I highly recommend you join if you're interested in those subjects. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how OpenBazaar sort of works, technically speaking. So it is a desktop app. So you download this to your computer. There is a third party who offers a mobile app called Bazaar Hound, which is available on all different phone operating systems. And we're looking at doing a mobile app ourselves in the future, just not quite yet. It's actually two programs in one, right? So you have the OpenBazaar server, and you have the client. Each user has their own server and client, right? You're not connecting to one server, obviously, because it's decentralized. The server is what creates, signs, and verifies the contracts used for trade. And the next slide, I talk about what's unique about these contracts. It communicates with other nodes in the network using UDP, which is the reason that right now it cannot use Tor, but that will change. And it handles the Bitcoin multisig and direct transactions. All the Bitcoin key stuff is done on the server side. The client is the graphical interface that you use to control the server, right? Classic client-server relationship. It's an Electron app. It's basically like a Chromium wrapper. The client and server don't need to be on the same machine, actually. And very commonly, people will rent a virtual private server to run the server and connect from their local machine to that server so that you have better uptime and stuff. Okay, so Ricardian contracts are the structure that we use to facilitate trade between people on the network. A definition of Ricardian contracts, there are sort of a few, but a good one is that they place the defining elements of a legal agreement in a format that can be expressed and executed in software. So you have some sort of agreement that you're making between people, and it can be put into a, it can be read by computers and understood by computers. So the neat thing about this is all the trade information that you need to engage in trade with people is located in one JSON, one nested JSON document, okay? And it's signed each step of the trade. So what happens is it starts with the seller. They will list their product on the network. What they're actually doing is creating a JSON document that has all the details of the listing. They sign it and they push it out to the rest of the network. And then if a buyer wants to engage in trade, they will take that contract and then they will basically sign it, push it back to the seller, and send Bitcoin to them. And that sort of starts the trade, and it goes from that point on, signing at each step so that at every point that the most recent contract has everything you need to continue trade. This, you may not be able to see this well, but this is just what it looks like, right? So this is the description, the currency code you're using, title, whether it's not safe for work or not, keywords, just all the stuff you need for trade is included in these contracts. Each node, so each server, it's a node on the peer-to-peer network, has a couple different sets of keys. One set of keys is used to create the GUID, or globally unique identifier. That's sort of the identity on the OpenBazaar network, and that uses public key cryptography to be able to sign and verify everything. Each node also had Bitcoin keys. They're hierarchical deterministic. All messages are signed with that GUID. And then they're also all encrypted with the public key of the person that you're sending the message to, right? So all the traffic is encrypted on the network. Listings themselves, the actual objects that you're, that you're viewing, get a hash, and that is basically their URL, more or less. This is not HTTP based, right? This is a completely separate peer-to-peer network. So you get this hash of the listing, and then when you enter that into the client, it browses to that store and will pull that information in to your client. Naturally, all messages are checked for validity. What's the point of having public key cryptography if you don't check if it's valid? And then, interestingly, the end-to-end encrypted chat is already in use in the software, which is a really neat feature that a lot of people find valuable for engaging in trade with people, just to be able to communicate with them directly. There are two ways that you can use Bitcoin in OpenBazaar. There are direct transactions. So what actually happens is the server creates keys using HD, and it will create a new address for every single transaction that comes in. The buyer sends the funds to, it basically contacts the node and says, where do you want to send funds? It sends the funds to that new address. That prevents address reuse for good Bitcoin hygiene. And then when the seller ships the good and states that they've shipped the good, they can choose the Bitcoin address that they want to pull those funds out from their OpenBazaar node. But more interestingly, there's also moderated transactions, and this is multisig. So OpenBazaar uses 2 of 3 multisig. And this audience, you probably understand multisig fine. The basic idea is you have sort of joint control over Bitcoin in a particular account. What that allows you to do is escrow. So 2 of 3 is what we use. That's buyer, seller, and a trusted third party, a mutually trusted third party. Both buyer and seller have to agree before a moderated transaction takes place. So the buyer will send funds, they start the order, they send funds into the multisig address. The seller ships the good to the buyer. If the buyer and the seller are both happy, that's 2 of 3 parties right there. You never had to bring in this third party. They're not actually even aware that the trade existed, that the trade happened. If there is a dispute, and one party is unhappy with the trade that occurred, they can then join with the, they can then start the dispute resolution process basically, figure out who is at fault, and then they can join with the winning party to release funds to them. Either it can be a refund to the buyer, it can be released to the seller, or moderators can actually propose transactions that split funds based on any split they want. Moderators get a fee from what comes out of the multisig account, which they set themselves, and of course both parties have to agree to before they start the trade. Usually it's 1 or 2%, whatever, but that's their incentive to offer the service. The really exciting thing here, in my opinion, is that this is an open marketplace for dispute resolution, right? This isn't any one company that has the right to be the multisig provider. Anyone can be a moderator on the network, and you can choose anyone to moderate. So you can, and this competition, right, based on prices, based on whether or not they are publicly identifiable, their attorneys, right, they have knowledge of the particular trade that you're involved in. This open marketplace for dispute resolution, I think, is really unique and is really neat. Okay. So the current version uses a Kademlia distributed hash table. It's a custom variation ourselves, but I won't go too much into what this is. The basic concept of a distributed hash table is that you take some data over on the left here. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. Oh, that's annoying, sorry. Regardless, you can see the slide. You take some data, you put it through a hash function, and then you get out some sort of standard response, which they're calling a key here. That information is then put into this sort of distributed network. Each node in the OpenBazaar network holds sort of a portion of this distributed hash table. And then that allows people to, in a completely distributed manner, look up information from other peers. So it's used in OpenBazaar for routing, to be able to find other nodes and find other listings. It's used for a moderator list. So how do you know where to, how to find moderators? Well, actually, we take basically a list of all active moderators and put it into this distributed hash table. Some messages are on here. It's not great practice to actually put messages into a DHT, so we try to limit that, but there are some messages that go in here. And then search keywords are in here as well, which is really interesting. Basically what happens in OpenBazaar for product discovery is a very simple search solution where every listing gets specific keywords. So if you're selling a t-shirt, you would put on t-shirt, clothing, whatever. Those specific keywords are then put into this distributed hash table. Anyone that searches for those keywords gets back all the listings that have that tagged. Now, that's actually not a very good way to do search. And I'll talk about later some of the limitations of the current version of the software. It's very naive and easily gameable. So a distributed hash table is not great, actually, for doing this. This is sort of our first attempt, and we found that it doesn't work that well. But for things like routing and other things, it's a really great way to do this in a decentralized fashion. Okay, quick summary of what I just said on the technical side. Public key crypto together with recording contracts mean you have this verifiable record of trade at every step. 2 of 3 multisig means you can have secure escrow. along with the open marketplace for trusted third parties. The distributed hash table allows for a peer-to-peer discovery of information, right? Completely distributed manner. And boom, you sort of throw all these things together, and decentralized trade comes out on the other end. Okay, so I just told you what it all is. Let me just sort of show you in case you haven't used it yourself. By the way, how many people here coming into this had already heard of OpenBazaar? I'm curious. Oh, well, that's wonderful. I'm excited to see that. How many people here have actually used OpenBazaar? Okay, well, that's actually, I'm impressed. Great job, guys. I'm excited to see that. Okay, so what this is when you first start the app, you're basically automatically connected to a bunch of other people running the app, and it just shows you a whole list of everything that's up there, right? This is not great product discovery because this is random right here. I'll talk later about how we're improving that, but it's kind of cool to browse through and see what people are selling. So there's some Under Armour, there's a light, some really, really, really hot peppers. There's one vendor on there called Pex Peppers who sells hot sauce that is like insanely hot, and I love it. It's great stuff. Okay. I don't always love it the next day, but that's a different story. All right. This is just an example of what a storefront looks like. This is the OpenBazaar store. I actually run the store myself. We have OpenBazaar swag. But what you can see on here, hopefully I don't screw this up again. Okay. On the right, this is actually the chat function here. You can open up a tab of anyone that you're talking to and talk to them directly, which is a lot of fun. This is, well, creating a listing, this is because I'm looking at it from the perspective of I'm the seller here. You can create a new listing whenever you want. Of course, these are the items being sold. It gives you the price in Bitcoin and the price in fiat, whatever one you choose. We use APIs to do conversions sort of on the fly. The number of followers, right now the OpenBazaar store has just under 25,000 people following it, which is great. Reviews here, we have just under 100 reviews. Yeah, and then up here, so this is the URL, I don't know if you can read it. It says @OpenBazaar/store. We actually work with another project, Blockstack, to get IDs so that you don't have to rely on this very unfriendly hash for each store identity. You can basically tie a store hash to a friendly name, and then we resolve it by using it in the client here. So that's fun. This is what the listing creation details looks like. So you can see it's fairly similar to other e-commerce platforms. You need the title, the type, the price, condition, your description, shipping details, pictures, whatever. It's nothing particularly fascinating, but that's how you create listings. This is what a listing looks like. Note that we do have the ability to do reviews. So right now, this particular OpenBazaar pen, which you can all go purchase on the OpenBazaar store, and I recommend you do, has 14 reviews, 4.75 out of 5. Oops, I probably didn't ship quick enough on one transaction or something. But it gives you the information you need to be able to engage in the trade. If you clicked on the Buy Now button, eventually you would go through a few other screens that talk about your shipping information and what you need. This is actually a pair of shoes. It's not the same one, but anyway, it then displays a QR code as well as the ability to copy the information to a wallet that you use locally to pay the Bitcoin, right? And as soon as the Bitcoin are paid, you get a nice little green check mark that makes you feel real good that the network actually knows that the trade occurred, and you go on from that point. Okay, so what are the limitations of the current software, right? OpenBazaar version 1 that's been out since April. Well, the node must be consistently online for your listings to be accessible to other people. That makes sense in a peer-to-peer network, right? Like you're connecting directly to someone else's computer and pulling off their information from their computer. That can be difficult though, right? A lot of people use laptops. Laptops aren't always running. You close them, they go offline. People may not have a reliable internet connection or even reliable electricity depending on where you are in the world. So what we have found is a lot of people will sort of start it out of curiosity, but because it requires you to run it all the time, it'll go offline at some point and it will not come back online, right? So that's a big issue. Product discovery is pretty bad, especially search, as I already explained. Search is very gameable and naive. There is really no way in the app to actually do product discovery other than search and that random browsing experience. So not a great way to be able to find other products. Fortunately, there are some search engines that are crawling the OpenBazaar network and doing a pretty good job of that, but that's outside of the app itself. We don't want to force people to have to go out of the app. There's a lack of common e-commerce features, such as inventory management and all kinds of things that users expect from an e-commerce platform. Amazon has a 20-year head start on what we're doing here, right? And many billions of dollars and thousands of people working on it, right? So it's like, you know, we're not there yet, and it shows. There's a lot of features that people want that just aren't there yet. OpenBazaar is not anonymous at the moment, okay? All the trade is encrypted, peer-to-peer encrypted, so it's private in a sense. But this is done on the ClearNet. This is your IP address is out there. Now, you can use a VPN. You can basically treat this like a torrenting client, more or less. You can use a VPN, which gives you some privacy. But right now, because it's UDP-based, you cannot use Tor. It is Bitcoin only. This is both a positive and a negative thing. It's positive because it simplifies the code in a lot of ways. You're just relying on Bitcoin. Of course, it's positive because Bitcoin's awesome, and you can do multi-sig and that kind of stuff. But it's negative in the sense that anyone who's going to be using OpenBazaar must already be familiar with and comfortable with using Bitcoin. And they must already have a wallet themselves outside of the software. It also requires some technical knowledge. It's not a huge learning curve. I welcome you again to download it yourself and try it out. It's pretty easy to use the installer to get it running. But when something goes wrong, it's pretty difficult to figure it out yourself without going into the Slack and, you know, figuring, hey, what is going on here? You know, we have a lot of problems with troubleshooting. So it's not dead simple at this point, and we want it to be dead simple. Okay, so those are some of the limitations that we just discussed. We are trying to tackle some of these problems with a new major version of the software, which we're calling 2.0. We've talked a lot with users of the version 1. Of course, we are users ourselves, naturally. And, you know, we've identified these limitations. And so we're working hard to address them as much as we possibly can. Some major improvements that I'll go through in detail here. One is that we're shifting to IPFS on the back end, which is really exciting development that I'll talk about in detail. Another is the creation of an internal wallet. You're going to have a Bitcoin wallet directly on your OpenBazaar node. We're switching to Go language, the Go language. Currently, it's all Python on the back end. We're going to be using Go. There will be significantly better product discovery. Both the ability to pull in, to contact a third-party search through APIs, and a new feature called channels, which I'll talk about. Tor integration is likely. I don't want to say it's definite, because it's based on IPFS integration, but we already have had an experimental node running, OpenBazaar node running over Tor, so it seems likely. A bunch more e-commerce features, such as inventory management, will be coming, and it's just an updated and better design altogether. Okay, IPFS. IPFS stands for the Interplanetary File System. How many people here are sort of familiar with IPFS? Okay, cool. So it's a distributed file system, right? It's sort of a peer-to-peer network itself. The interesting thing about it is it's hash-based instead of location-based. So I'll give you an example of what that means. If you were going to try to find the Satoshi white paper, right, the original Bitcoin PDF, really, even though half of your friends might have that file on their hard drive, you still are going to need to go to a specific server located who knows where via HTTP to pull down that particular file from that one server. So it's not a particularly efficient way to do it. With IPFS, a hash-based system, there is a specific hash for that document, that PDF. And then this peer-to-peer network means the closest person that you are to that hash You just pull it from them. There's no one location that has it. You pull it from anyone that has it on the network. That means that, at least in theory, content is much more distributed. Right? Instead of that one location, now all of your friends that have this on their hard drive can feed that to you. It's like torrenting. A bunch of people are seeding that hash. So it should be reached much more efficiently and hopefully faster as well. What this means for OpenBazaar is that the stored data and the listings data is now going to be put onto an IPFS node. Every time when you run an OpenBazaar server in the 2.0, it's making you an IPFS node. So if other people seed your data, then your store doesn't actually need to be online 24/7 in order for people to engage in trade. You can be offline and people can still engage in trade, which we think is going to be a huge sort of upgrade to what we're doing now. Now, there's actually not a guarantee that your data is being seeded, right? That's not how IPFS works. You can't push something to everyone else and make them store it. The way that we're doing it at OpenBazaar, at least currently, is if someone else has visited your store, they automatically begin reseeding your data. Also, when you create a listing, you have the option to push that listing to someone else if that other person has agreed to be sort of like a gateway to the network to allow hosting of data. And OB1, the company that I talked about earlier, we are going to sort of run one of these gateway nodes that by default people will have the data pushed to if they so choose. So there should always be sort of a seeder of last resort on this network. Another exciting part about this for us is that the current custom distributed hash table and networking code in the OpenBazaar server is pretty much entirely replaced by the much better IPFS implementation. Okay, so roughly, I don't know, 60% of our server code right now is dedicated to creating this custom DHT and the peer-to-peer networking code. That all gets taken out and IPFS put in, which is wonderful from a sort of maintenance point of view, and the fact that that IPFS team, in our opinion, is a very good developer team. And then, of course, lastly, as I mentioned earlier, IPFS does not have the limitations that our current setup has and should be able to allow Tor traffic. Next, we're creating an internal wallet. This basically just makes the whole app easier to use, especially for people that are new to Bitcoin. Sort of our goal kind of long term is that users they're using Bitcoin because of the benefits of using Bitcoin, but they don't necessarily even need to know that they're using Bitcoin. So as an example, if we partnered with a provider who sells Bitcoin, you could put your credit card information in, it'll send the Bitcoin directly to your internal OpenBazaar wallet, and you can buy things without ever even needing to look at the Bitcoin prices or anything. It's just all going to be done in fiat. Now, for everyone here that's like, screw fiat money. Well, okay, great. You can always do it in Bitcoin. You never need to, to do this because you're power users. But for average users, we think this is going to be a big benefit. It also allows for some really neat stuff and more complicated transactions. So, for example, if you control the wallet yourself, then you can do things like time-locked transactions, which hopefully prevent funds from not being released because of non-responsive parties or whatnot. You can also do one of two multi-sig. So I mentioned earlier that you can engage in trade with an offline party. Well, maybe that makes you a little nervous, because what if the party went offline and never comes back online again? Well, if you send the funds directly to them, that means your Bitcoin are gone forever, right? Because Bitcoin transactions are non-reversible. Well, with a one of two multi-sig setup, you put it into this one of two multi-sig, either party can take it out. If the seller comes back online and takes the money out, then the trade proceeds as normal. If they never come back online, you can just come and get your Bitcoin back. So it gives you more security. That can't be done with an external wallet, right? Or not easily, at least. It would be very, very difficult to figure out how to communicate that with an external wallet. With an internal wallet, you can do it. It also allows for sending Bitcoin based on OpenBazaar profile itself, or the GUID. This is cool because there's sort of already a social element to what OpenBazaar is. It's naturally this sort of peer-to-peer network of people. And we think the ability to just send money directly to other people enhances that. So here's a screenshot of the new design for the 2.0 wallet. I don't know how well you can see it, but up here, you know, there's the sending tab. You can send it to a handle, an ID, or an address. It's a full wallet like any other. Of course, the amount and whatnot. And then the option to deposit and see your previous activity. It's fairly simple, but hopefully a powerful tool. I won't dwell on this change much because I'm not a developer myself, but we are switching to Go language. I am told it's better than Python for dependency management, which people installing from source has become somewhat burdensome with Python. It's supposed to be more stable and faster than the current Python app. And it also has better error reporting and ability to create documentation than the current attempt. Anyone who is a developer and a really big Python fan, I don't really want to hear your argument why I'm wrong on this. Just talk to the developers. Okay. Okay. Better product discovery. This is something we've thought a lot about and put a lot of effort into because it's one of the main weaknesses of the current version. We're going to allow search integrated directly into the client through third parties in the next version. So third parties that offer this API, within the client itself, you'll be able to send them a request, a search request, get back the data, and view it in client. That includes some filters as well. So it's not just sort of the naive one-word search. You can filter the stuff you want to see based on location, based on price, based on whatever, and the search provider can include that filtered information back. We also are creating a feature called channels. Channels allows a provider of content to curate this data, this content into one place, and then in the app you can go view that channel, and everything that they have curated is available to you in the app as well. So the basic idea to think about it is search, of course, is search, and then channels is a way to browse, what other people have put together that they think you may be interested in. Interestingly, these content lists for browsing, the channels, are actually going to be hosted on IPFS themselves. So you don't need to have a provider online in order to view channels, right? The channel list can be uploaded to IPFS. If it gets seeded, then you can view this channel list even if the provider's offline. That could be really cool for a channel list that is specifically around, not safe for work material. Okay, this is just a quick design mock-up of what search is going to look like in here. Pretty standard stuff, search bar. It shows you the listings over here. Here's the filters that I talked about that you can filter stuff on. Some filtering is done client-side automatically. Some is done via the search provider. This is also just generally a look at what the new design is going to look like. There's going to be more e-commerce features in 2.0. So as I talked about, there's a lot lacking in the current version. Some of the big ones that we're adding, inventory tracking, naturally is very important and is going to be included in 2.0. Variants as well, right? So color, size, any kind of variant that you want. Much more flexible shipping options. Shipping is very naive in the current version. There's not a lot of nuance you can add. That's changing. There's better moderator selection. I won't go into the details there, but it should be easier to find good moderators for people. And just in general, the design is improved. This is not a great screenshot, but this just shows you some of the variant and inventory abilities we have. You can do based on size or color, whatever, and then change the tags here. And then down here, you can actually change the amount charged for each variant, and then change the quantity available, right? So this should give a lot more flexibility to vendors. This is just a screenshot of the new transactions modal here to show you the improved design. There's a nice progress bar sort of up top, and hopefully the format is much more appealing and simple than the current version. Okay, if you want to find out more about this, you can go to our GitHub. This is all open source. It's MIT licensed. If you're a developer, we would absolutely love code review or any thoughts you have. You can go to our blog. We do, every week, we do a highlight of a particular vendor on the network that has unique products, which is fun. We also do a weekly development update. So everything we've done the past week, we try to lay it out in detail for people to keep up. Our Slack, as I mentioned earlier, has a pretty big community of really cool people, so I recommend you join. And of course, if you want to find out more, use it, right? Completely free to use. It costs you nothing but your time. I would really appreciate if you would check it out. Okay, now we have time for Q&A. I would love to hear your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam, for your presentation. I have few short questions to you. So I'm active user of OpenBazaar. I created 3 stores, multiple listings. So first thing, I'm not sure if it is solved in the current version of OpenBazaar, but in the maybe few months ago, what I was missing was a reputation of moderators.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still missing probably.
Yes.
Because this is so moderators are definitely a great idea, but the ordinary user, they have no clue whose moderator they should choose.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so this is a big issue. Stores have ratings, so you can look at reviews that have been left from buyers on stores. But moderators do not have reputation at the moment. The reason why is in a completely decentralized system, it's very difficult to sort of show that any particular party is giving a good review. The problem with moderators specifically is either the losing side can always say, this moderator is a piece of shit, and what are you going to say about it, right? The other side, the winning side, might say, this person is an angel. How are you going to be able to sift that out? So what we really are doing is relying on third parties to show the moderators in the network and then allow this sort of competitive marketplace to work its magic. And I will say that DuoSearch specifically has a section on their website that shows you moderators online, and it lists them based on the number of contracts that people have chosen them for. That's a pretty good proxy for saying this moderator is more reputable than another moderator that has 2 people listed. So for now, that's really the best we have.
Okay, and the second short question. So the next version, which will be based on IPFS, it means no UDP in version 2? No UDP.
Well, so I'll punt and say that I don't know the details of how IPFS does its peer-to-peer networking. Okay. But I believe it uses both TCP and UDP, depending on the service.
I'm not saying about the possibility for Tor support. Right. I'm just telling, because personally I had some issues with some behind some firewalls. Yeah. You know, like UDP is probably in a,
so like NAT traversal should be significantly improved by switching to IPFS.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Yes. Not issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Question.
Thanks for the presentation. You said there were no fees, and yet it's venture capital financed. Where does their cut come from?
Right, great question. So the cut does not come from transactions occurring on the network. And there's a few reasons for that. First, we got involved with this because we believe in sort of free trade for all. Like, we want to create this network where there's a zero-take network, right? So we just philosophically would not introduce fees into the network because we don't want to do that. But also, because it's open source, the day we attempted to throw a cut in for, say, OB1 into each transaction, it gets forked to truly free OpenBazaar, and they take that right back out. So we are really forced to do this sort of honestly. OB1, the company that got the funding, not OpenBazaar, that's the software. OB1 is going to offer services to users on the network to give them a better experience, and naturally those will be paid services. And we're not public yet about what they're going to be, but we will be in the near future.
Two questions. The first, is there a way in the 2.0 version to have multiple items in a cart?
To have, say it again?
Multiple, more than one item in a cart before paying.
Right. Yeah, so we talked a lot about the cart idea, being able to sort of bundle stuff together. And we looked a lot at being able to create a cart where you could sort of check out all at once, even shopping from multiple stores. So you could like add everything and then check out at once. The way Bitcoin works, that's actually really hard to do among different stores. But you can do it within the same store now. Well, a problem with the current version is that shipping is sort of added to each product. So even if you're shipping, ordering 2 things from the same store, it adds shipping on each time, which obviously is a terrible way to do it. So in the new version, within each store, you can order multiple items with the same shipping costs.
Okay, thank you. The second question is about the aliases and the one name thing.
One name?
Yes.
Is there, I'm sorry, what was the question around one name?
With Namecoin, you told that
Namecoin.
there will be change about this.
We are looking at the ability to use more than just the block stack ID to tie your name to. But we don't really have more details right now. Block stack is the main way to do it, but we are looking at other options as well.
Hello, I want to ask, what is the business model of the OpenBazaar company?
Yeah, so as I sort of alluded to earlier, OB1 is going to offer paid services to people, but we're not really putting forward what those are going to be yet. When 2.0 launches, it's likely that we are going to launch with services at the same time, and we're just sort of keeping that close to our vest at the moment.
Hi.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt you for a second. Our vision is that we are going to have a significant portion of online commerce switched from the current centralized models to the decentralized model in the next few years. So that the potential pool of people is going to, we think, is going to be large, and the people who created the software, I think, are going to have great opportunities to make profit. So, yeah.
Hi. I used OpenBazaar in April. I played with that, and thank you that you are fixing the search. I think it sucked really a lot.
Yes,
I had
it did,
problems to filter out the drugs because I wanted to find interesting stuff, but not drugs. So I have 2 questions. One is, do you enable in 2.0 to add metadata into the products so I can, for instance, create departments and I search just for TVs, for instance? And second question is, did I understand correctly that that you mentioned third parties as a search engines for the IPFS for the listings? So does it mean that the third party will be able to monitor what I search for?
Well, okay, so 2 questions there. I'll take the second one first. There's a difference in this search concept and the channels concept. Search is that you're literally hitting up a third-party server looking for information that they have collected around the listings that you're searching for. Naturally, yes, the third party is going to see what you're searching for. The second version, channels, is different. What they actually do is you create this sort of, it's a JSON, I think it's JSON, regardless, it's a single data structure that puts a list of all these listings in one place, and that's pushed out to IPFS. So if you pull that off of IPFS and browse through that, no, the people who collected it do not see what you're looking at. But search, yes, they do. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your first question.
Metadata. Metadata on the listings, on the products.
Well, there is sort of that's going to depend on how the search provider chooses to sort of parse the data, because there is a description field and keyword field. So you can add whatever you want in the description as well as the keywords, and then the parties who choose, they can take that data and make it metadata however they want to, really. And channels is meant to sort of be a way to allow people to create categories of goods based on similar metadata as well. That's kind of the goal.
Thank you.
And probably we have time for last 2 questions. I don't know. There should be another presentation here about building an OpenBazaar after you.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, is there a plan to create or allow a web-based access to the OpenBazaar stores, through some sort of trusted peers, so you can actually widen the market and allow the general public to access the markets on OpenBazaar?
Yes. So this is all done, the server and client all communicate through APIs, so any third party that's willing to innovate themselves can use those APIs to create their own custom sort of visual interface, which is already happening. Again, Justin Drake of Duo Money, the creator of the search engine, will be talking in a minute here about him doing that. But also IPFS is interesting too, because it allows any node to become sort of a gateway to HTTP. There's just a setting in IPFS that lets you switch your node on, and anyone can view what's on your node through the web. So it should be much simpler in 2.0 because we're using this IPFS method to connect to the HTTP web as well.
Hello. I'm seeing a quite worrying trend now because you created your own wallet and the White House created their own wallet. If you want to be secure on the blockchain, you should use Bitcoin Qt, and if you want to use Trezor, you need to use, for example, Electrum.
Yeah.
And as far as I remember, BitSquare also has its own wallet.
Yeah.
So you need to use like 5 wallets if you want to use 5 services with Bitcoin. Isn't that?
I hear your point. What I'll say is using the internal wallet is optional. There is always the option to actually still use an external wallet if that's something that you prefer. Also, for people who are more privacy focused and they don't like using an SPV wallet, period, there is actually a setting already in the 2.0 server that lets you select a Bitcoin D server as well. So the optionality is there for people who have those preferences.